So how do we use this two-step self-compassion process with difficult emotions and difficult thoughts? Well, it's much like we did in the stop practice. So check out that video if you've not seen those already. But we have to use this two-step process, first of all, to become aware of the mood we're in. So often with difficult thoughts and feelings, they might be happening automatically below our radar of awareness. And then that could be affecting our behavior and our mood. So first of all, we want to use the mindfulness to be aware of actually what's going on. And then we want to use mindfulness to step back and to unhook from the difficult thoughts and feelings. And then from there, we want to bring in the self-compassion. So the compassionate self-talk, the compassionate behaviors, compassionate attention. So focusing on things that will support us and help us in these difficult thoughts and feelings. Example of depression, because that will often have a strong internal critic, and self-compassion is so supportive with a strong internal critic and shame. We wake up in the morning and we're feeling heavy and lethargic, difficult to get motivated, difficult to choose to do things, a strong temptation to stay in bed. Or equally with depression, often people wake up feeling very anxious, so there can be this blend of anxiety and depression together. And so we're waking up with a very difficult physical state in order to get going and do things that we care about. And also our thoughts may be either very unclear and distracted or very self-critical. So we've got these difficult feelings in our body, these challenging thoughts or difficulties with attention and thinking, and challenging urges, so urges to stay in bed, to avoid doing things, to perhaps give up in the severe end of the scale, to sort of shut down and really stop. And maybe even harm ourselves, or these sorts of difficulties that people find with depression. And so we want to use mindfulness to notice that, first of all, notice that we've got these difficult thoughts and feelings and that they are hijacking and controlling our attention and behavior. And then we want to use mindfulness to unhook from this. So we'll do another video on diffusion from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a great way to get some distance and space from the thoughts so that we can choose our actions more freely. And very simply, we can just notice and name what's going on. So we can use the phrasing, I notice I'm having the thought of, or I notice I'm having the feeling of, or simply you can name it as thinking, or critical thoughts, or depression, or pain, or anxiety. So we can use single labels or the slightly longer phrasing if we need a bit more distance, or if we've practiced a bit, we can just notice. We don't need to use the labeling unless it's helpful. And we'll do another video on labeling to describe that and look at the research on that and why that can be such a useful skill for mindfulness. And once we've got that step back from the thoughts and feelings, so they're not right up in our face controlling what we do, there's a bit of distance, they're still there, we're not getting rid of them, we can't shut down that part of the brain or the nervous system, at least not for long periods of time. And those thoughts and feelings will come back, and they may be sometimes very close, sometimes far away. But we want to try and unhook with mindfulness and then bring in the self-compassion. So we're in the bed, lying, feeling like we don't want to get up, or feeling like we want to avoid something. We notice and name that. I feel lowness in my body. I am having the feeling of lethargy, lack of motivation. I am having critical thoughts. Here is depression. Here is low mood. However we want to label it, or just notice that. So notice where those feelings are in the body, each different individual feeling, and then the feeling as a whole. And then noticing the thoughts, the internal words, the internal images, and just doing that as long as it takes. So in the beginning it might take longer. As we practice, we can notice and notice a name very quickly. And then we bring in this parallel, supportive, compassionate voice. So this is really tough. This is a difficult feeling to wake up with. I wouldn't choose this, but I have this right now. I'm going to support myself. I'm going to do what's best for me over the long run. I'm going to support myself. I can get through this. So it can be validating and accepting self-talk, so not pushing away, but trying to build this acceptance and validating that it is really tough and it is really painful. And then it can be motivational and instructional. So motivational, encouraging us, saying, you know, I can get through this. This is tough, but I have got through these moods before, these difficult states. Or instructional, so okay, I've got to get out of bed now, so let's sit on the edge of the bed. Yeah, well done, that's great, I've been able to move. Even that is difficult when we're really depressed, to move. So we can literally just encourage ourselves, motivate ourselves with kind self-talk. You know, I'm doing the best I can. This is really difficult. I didn't choose to have this brain experiencing depression right now. So how can I look after myself? And then we think about behavior. So what's going to support us best with this depressed mood, this difficult state? Okay, very likely might be to go and connect with someone, even when we don't feel like it, even when the pain is there and it's hard, and there might be social comparison and judgment and hopelessness, helplessness, all of that going on. We notice a name and then go to the phone and try and connect with someone, or make a plan, or even just get out of the house and go to a public space, a cafe or something like that, or a park, and just get out of that environment, which might be part of the problem. Being stuck in that room could be part of it. And then as we do that, we try and focus and engage on what we're doing. As the depressive thoughts come back in, we notice a name, bring in some self-compassion, self-talk, and then, you know, focus back onto what we're doing, who we're with, what we want to experience. And we just keep doing that. And in the beginning, you're going to have to do it a lot. It's heavy work, it's difficult work, but it can get you through it. And then over time, you'll have to do it less. You'll be more focused, more engaged in things. Now and again, there might be fluctuations with mood, but mostly you're starting to get absorbed and connected again with less of that self-focus, less of that rumination, and more focus on the outside world, and then supportive self-talk. And sometimes I liken it to an endurance event in the beginning. So depression and anxiety really are very much like endurance events or rites of passage. So it's really difficult to do basic things. And you know, what doesn't always get acknowledged is, you know, when you are depressed, you really genuinely feel hopeless. You know, it's not just a surface thought that you don't really believe. You really believe that thought and it really hooks you. And with anxiety, when you're really anxious, you are really fearing for your life. You're not, you know, a little bit worried and a little bit heart rate up. You genuinely feel some sort of mortal dread and existential terror with that anxiety. And that mood state, mind state has evolved to get us to act. So they are really compelling. And sometimes in therapy that doesn't get acknowledged so much, that actually it is really difficult to do this work. But that's where we use the determination. So we keep going, we keep using the tools. So we keep using mindfulness tools, we keep using self-compassion tools, we keep using exposure and response prevention tools, whatever the tools are, and we'll explore different ones. But very simply, we want to accept and step back from difficult thoughts and feelings and engage with our life, and then be supportive and kind. And I like the researcher Barbara Fredrickson's technique, where she talks about narrate your day in a compassionate and supportive way, or a kind and supportive way. So you use that self-talk, you actually take a little bit of control of it rather than let it be automatic, and you make it supportive and kind. And the key thing here is that it's in parallel to the critic. So we're not debating and fighting with the critic and trying to push the critic down. Instead, we're trying to bring in a supportive, kind voice alongside the critic that goes, okay, yeah, this is difficult, this is really tough, but what can I do now? How can I support myself? And then the critic comes back, we notice a name, step back, and bringing in parallel this kind voice. So they're not fighting, they're not battling, it's supportive and alongside the distress. Very much like this endurance event idea. So we use that self-talk to motivate and keep ourselves going through the pain of the marathon, the ultra marathon, whatever it is. We say to ourselves, I can do this, I can keep going, this will pass, I just need to get to the next point on the race, I just need to get to the next part of my day, I just need to work at my focus, my engagement, my compassionate support, and let's see how it goes. Let's do this as an experiment and see where we get to if we practice this skill. So that would be depression. Very much could use the same thing with anxiety and with other difficulties, and we'll have a look at anxiety in the next video and how to use self-compassion with that. So much of the skills are the same, but there's some little tweaks here and there, so we'll look at that one next. So we've got this two-stage process: mindfulness and then self-compassion, self-talk or behavior. And we can also add in common humanity, compassionate imagery, other tools from compassion focused therapy, and we'll look at those as well in another video. I guess the main thing is to practice this. This compassionate voice may not be very strong yet, and if you've got a lot of shame and self-criticism that's been modeled to you throughout your life, throughout your early attachments, or just the way your brain is, or the way any of our brains are, it can be that we have a stronger critic. It will take training, it will take practice to get those neural pathways of compassion strong enough to inhibit the self-critic and the inner critic. So practice is the key, I guess, a gentle, kind, supportive practice.